Is America obsessed with an economic indicator? Should it be? We'll explore the issue in today's edition of CNN Student News. Hi, everyone. I'm Carl Azus. First up, the federal government launches a program aimed at fixing the country's foreclosure crisis. Now, this process, foreclosure, happens when an owner loses his or her rights to a property, like a house, usually because he or she can't afford to pay the mortgage. So how will this new plan confront the issue? Let's break down the details.
The idea: stop or at least slow down the record rate of U.S. home foreclosures. The hope that by helping as many as 9 million Americans stay in their homes, the government will plug up a hole in the leaky economic boat. The cost, $75 billion, which will come from the stimulus package that's now in effect. Who could this help? People who either need to refinance or are facing foreclosure. Let's say you bought a house a while back, got a mortgage, made your payments, and everything was going fine until you lost your job, or your interest rate reset, sending your payments skyrocketing. Now you can't afford your mortgage, and the government's aiming to adjust your interest rate to lower what you have to pay each month to help you out. Of course, that means the bank that loaned you the money would get less from you in interest, but the government would help make up the difference by paying the bank with stimulus funds. Not everyone who's in trouble or who owes more on his mortgage than his house is worth will get help. There are certain criteria that must be met. But the president says,
but it will help millions of Americans who are struggling with declining home values. Americans who will now be able to take advantage of the lower interest rates that this plan has already helped to bring about.
What's not clear is if adjusting people's loans really helps out in the long term. One recent study found that about half of those who had their loans adjusted still fell behind in payments within 6 months. And not everyone likes the idea because the government is essentially picking up the ball for people who made bad decisions and banks that made bad loans. In fact, 64% of those questioned in a recent poll said the president's plan is unfair to people who paid their mortgages on time. But for many others, these are desperate times, and the Obama administration says that bold action, whether or not everyone agrees with it, is needed.
Time for some fast facts. Darfur is a region in the African nation of Sudan. Violence erupted there in 2003 when rebel groups launched attacks against the Sudanese government. The fighting that followed led to what the United Nations calls the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The UN estimates that 300,000 people have been killed in the violence and 2.5 million others have been forced to flee their homes.
The International Criminal Court is charging the president of Sudan with multiple crimes in connection with that conflict. The court issued an arrest warrant for President Omar al-Bashir, the first time it's ever taken that action against a sitting head of state. The Sudanese government called the accusations an insult and said it does not plan to cooperate. Robin Curnow has more on yesterday's announcement.
Victims' justice for the 300,000 killed and more than 2.5 million people displaced in Darfur. Sudan's leader Omar al-Bashir, still smiling and defiant, named in an arrest warrant issued by the world's highest criminal court.
5 counts of crimes against humanity: murder, Article 7, paragraph 1a, extermination, Article 7, 1b, forcible transfer, Article 7.1d, torture, Article 7.1f, and rape, Article 7.1g.
A ghastly litany of alleged misdeeds for a sitting president to face, accused of masterminding war crimes and crimes against humanity against the citizens of Darfur. For now, he's been let off a genocide charge, but that might change, says the World Court.
Omar al-Bashir's official capacity as a sitting head of state does not exclude his criminal responsibility, nor does it grant him immunity against prosecution.
The court's action touched off sympathetic demonstrations in Brussels, London and Rome, while pro-Bashir rallies were held in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. The Sudanese government says it considers the arrest warrant unlawful.
It is like pouring oil on fire. In the Sudan, today it is a day of national outrage. a day of national anger. And we repeat with Shakespeare in Macbeth that all perfumes of Arabia will not clear this dirt created by the ICC against our leadership.
No one expects to see al-Bashir in the dock at The Hague anytime soon. The International Criminal Court has no police force. It says it expects United Nations member states to arrest the Sudanese president when and if he leaves the country's borders. Or for Sudan to give up its leader to face international justice, something the Sudanese say they have no intention of doing. Robin Kono, CNN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time for the shout-out. What animal indicates that things are going poorly on Wall Street? If you think you know it, shout it out. Is it a bear, bull, lion, or shark? You've got 3 seconds. Go! A bear market describes a prolonged period of bad news, and a bull market is just the opposite. That's your answer, and that's your shout-out.
So right now, we are definitely in a bear market. And if you want proof, just take a look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Went up about 150 points yesterday, but that is after a 5-day slump that left the Dow at its lowest level in nearly 12 years. We talk a lot about the Dow on our show. That is because it gives an idea of how the market is doing overall. But is America obsessed with this one economic indicator? Carol Costello explores the answer.
The Dow has taken on a life of its own. It's up, it's down, it's tanked, and America can't take its eyes off its little wiggly line.
But it bothers me because that showed me how the economy is doing.
It concerns me more because of how everybody reacts to it.
I'm concerned. Definitely, I'm alarmed.
And why wouldn't they feel that way? The falling Dow is all they hear about. It's the kind of analysis that has talk radio buzzing.
The Dow Jones will make you feel like a victim.
Psychologist Dr. Joy Brown says her listeners have become obsessed with the Dow.
We've become henny penny. The Dow is falling. The Dow is falling. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the Dow is straight id. It's just uncivilized. That's what the Dow is. It doesn't mean anything.
Dr. Brown says you should ask yourself this. Did you become a multimillionaire when the Dow soared to 14,000 in 2007? Brown says if you have a job now and you pay your mortgage, it's not likely the falling Dow will drive you to the poorhouse. But make no mistake, market analysts like Art Hogan of Jefferies & Company says the Dow is an important economic indicator. When it loses 23% of its value, we ought to pay attention, but not obsess.
Watching the Dow every day is not going to predict the fact that you may become part of that 8% that's not working or that you may lose your house. Watching the Dow is more of a reflection of what investors think about the earnings power of those 30 companies that make up the Dow.
Hogan and other analysts say the erratically diving Dow is more an indication of how Wall Street feels about the president's plans to fix the economy. And traditionally, it has been an indication of how the economy will play out in the short term. And history tells us the Dow has always recovered.
Well, we have cooked up one more story for you before we go today. Things are really popping in one Iowa town. And that is because Sac City wants to reclaim its crown as the home of the world's biggest popcorn ball. It held the title twice previously. They could have tried buttering up the judges, but instead about 100 people got to work cooking up this 5,000-pound pile of popcorn. That is more than 2 pounds for every person who lives in Sac City. Now, you know we tried to come up with a corny pun to end today's show, but none of them really popped. We will be back tomorrow, though, to close out the week. Hope to see you then.